Have you ever looked back at a moment in your life that felt like pure devastation and realized years later that it was quietly the best thing that ever happened to you? The relationship that ended and left you hollow for months. The job offer that fell through at the last second. The friendship that disappeared without explanation. The door that closed so hard you felt the walls shake. At the time, every single one of those moments felt meaningless, random, unfair. But what if they weren't? What if the most painful chapters of your life were never accidents, but were always, quietly, exactly what needed to happen? Carl Jung spent his entire life asking this question, not as philosophy, not as comfort, as science, as depth psychology. And what he discovered disturbed him and changed him completely. Because Jung believed that beneath the surface of every coincidence, beneath every loss, every heartbreak, every unexpected turn, there is an intelligence at work. Not external, not divine in the way most people imagine, but yours, coming from within you, from the deepest layer of who you are. Jung called it the unconscious, and he believed it is always speaking. The question is, have you learned how to listen? Think about your life for just a moment. Think about the things that have happened to you that you never chose, the pain you didn't ask for, the people who left, the versions of yourself you had to abandon just to survive. Now consider this. What if none of it was random? What if there is a thread, invisible but real, connecting every single moment? Jung believed there was. And by the end of this video, you may never look at your own life the same way again. Let's begin. There is a moment in Carl Jung's own life that he rarely spoke about publicly. Early in his career, he was sitting with a patient, a highly educated woman, a woman whose sharp, rational mind had made therapy almost impossible. She had been talking for weeks, analyzing everything, explaining everything, but nothing was moving inside her. One afternoon, she was describing a dream she'd had the night before. In the dream, someone had given her a golden scarab, an ancient Egyptian symbol of transformation and rebirth. And at the exact moment she was describing the dream, Jung heard a faint tapping at the window behind him. He turned. There, on the glass, was an insect, a scarab beetle, doing its best to get inside. Jung opened the window, caught the beetle, and handed it to the woman. "Here is your scarab," he said. The woman was shattered. Her rational armor broke in that single instant, and her healing began. Jung did not call this luck. He did not call it coincidence. He called it synchronicity, a meaningful connection between the inner world and the outer world, arriving at the exact moment the soul is ready to receive it. But here is what most people miss. The scarab didn't cause her healing. The scarab was a signal that she was already ready. Her unconscious had been preparing her. The dream was the first message. The beetle was the confirmation. And Jung spent the rest of his life believing this. The universe doesn't answer you before you're ready. It answers exactly when you are. Maybe you've felt something like this. You think about someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they call. You keep seeing the same number everywhere you look, on receipts, on license plates, on the clock at 3:17 in the morning when you can't sleep. You hear the same message 3 times in a single week from 3 completely different sources. You dismiss it. You call it coincidence. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet voice says, "This can't be random." Jung would tell you, it isn't. Your outer reality, he believed, is a mirror of your inner world. We don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are. And when the same lesson keeps appearing in your life, the same conflict in different relationships, the same loss wearing different faces, the same fear arriving in different disguises, it is not the world repeating itself. It is a part of you trying to be heard. Think about a woman who keeps finding herself in the same relationship. The faces change. The names change. The circumstances are always slightly different. But somehow, she always ends up with someone who pulls away just when she opens up. Someone who needs saving. Someone who is emotionally unavailable in ways she can never quite name. She blames her choices. She blames the men. She blames her city, her timing, her luck. But Jung would gently, firmly redirect her. Look inside, he would say. Not at what you are choosing, but at what you are not yet seeing in yourself. Because Jung understood something most of us spend decades avoiding. We don't attract what we want. We attract what we are. We attract what we haven't yet integrated within ourselves. The woman who keeps choosing unavailability was often taught long ago that love requires distance, that closeness is dangerous, that if someone truly sees her, they will leave. She didn't create this belief consciously. She inherited it from a parent who was never quite there, from a childhood that taught her love and loss arrive together. And so, without knowing it, she recreates the familiar wound, not because she is broken, but because her unconscious is trying to resolve something she never had the language to name. Jung called this a complex, a cluster of charged memories and emotions buried beneath awareness, quietly steering the wheel of a life. And here is what he discovered. You cannot dissolve a complex by pretending it isn't there. You cannot outrun it. You cannot logic your way past it. The only path through is to make it conscious, to stop, turn toward it, and ask, what is this trying to show me? If you recognize yourself in any part of this story, write in the comments right now, drop 11. I am ready to see what I have been avoiding. Let that be the first conscious step. But there's another story I want you to sit with for a moment. Think about a man who changes careers 5 times in a decade. Each time he tells himself it's a fresh start. New city, new company, new opportunity. And each time, within 2 years, something goes wrong. A conflict with a manager, a company that doesn't value him, a role that slowly begins to feel like a cage. He is intelligent. He is hard-working. He is genuinely talented. So why does this keep happening? Jung would not look at the jobs. He would look at the man. Specifically, he would look at what the man cannot tolerate. What kind of authority makes him shut down? What kind of environment makes him feel invisible? And almost always, in these cases, the answer lives in childhood, not as an excuse, as information. A child who grew up in a home where his voice was silenced, where expressing a need was met with dismissal, where achievement was the only currency of love, grows into an adult who cannot bear to feel unseen, who will unconsciously sabotage any situation where that old wound gets touched. Not because he is weak, because his inner child is still in the room, still waiting, still trying to be acknowledged. Jung believed that the inner child lives inside every adult. And if you do not learn to hear that child will find ways to be heard anyway. Through the choices you can't explain. Through the conflicts you can't stop repeating. Through the longing that never quite goes away. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That sentence is not poetry. It is a precise description of how most human lives actually unfold. You believe you are making choices, and in one sense, you are. But a far deeper part of you is also making choices. From older wounds, from inherited fears, from the rules you absorbed before you had any ability to question them. And those deeper choices, you don't call them choices. You call them just the way things are. Bad luck. The kind of person I am. What always happens to me. Jung called them fate, and he believed you could change yours, not by fighting it, but by understanding it. There is a concept in Jungian psychology that most people have heard, but very few have truly understood. The shadow. Jung described the shadow as the part of yourself you refuse to see, the qualities you have rejected, the emotions you were taught to suppress, the desires you buried because they felt unacceptable. We all have a shadow, not because we are bad people, but because we were all, at some point, taught that certain parts of us were too much. Too angry, too needy, too sensitive, too ambitious, too loud, too broken. And so we pushed those parts down. We built a mask, what Jung called the persona, to show the world what we believed it wanted to see. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits, and it expresses itself in the ways we least expect. Have you ever noticed that what irritates you most about other people is often something you have completely denied in yourself? The person who irritates you because they're so selfish. Has it ever occurred to you that you might have learned to suppress your own needs so completely that watching someone else honor theirs feels like an accusation? The person who irritates you because they're so emotionally cold. Could it be that you have spent years restraining your own desire to set limits, to protect yourself, to say no? Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Not as blame, as a map. Your reactions to other people are always pointing back to something unresolved within you. This is not comfortable to hear, It is one of the most liberating truths you will ever encounter. If something in this is landing for you right now, drop in the comments. Write 444, I am learning to see my own reflection. Say it as a commitment to yourself. Now, let's talk about the part of your story you would most like to forget. Think about a specific moment or a season that left a mark. Maybe it was a relationship that ended in a way that still doesn't make complete sense. Maybe it was a version of yourself you were forced to leave behind. Maybe it was something that happened when you were small and didn't have the words to understand it yet. Jung didn't want you to relive that moment. He wanted you to revisit it. There is a difference. Reliving is being pulled back into the pain as though it is still happening. Revisiting is standing at a slight distance and asking, what was really happening there? And specifically, what part of me was being formed in that fire? Because here is what Jung observed over and over in decades of clinical work. Our most defining moments of pain are almost always the places where our deepest strengths were forged. The child who was never truly heard becomes the adult who listens more deeply than anyone else in the room. The person who experienced profound loss at a young age develops a capacity for compassion that people who lived untouched lives simply cannot access. The one who is forced to stand alone develops a relationship with their own inner world that becomes their greatest lifelong resource. This is not a comfort. This is not meant to minimize what you went through. It is meant to offer you a different lens. Because pain that carries meaning can be integrated. Pain that remains meaningless is the kind that destroys. Jung's entire life's work was an attempt to help people find the meaning. Not the silver lining, not toxic positivity. The actual, specific, personal meaning hidden inside the specific wound. Jung also observed something that changed the way he understood human psychology entirely. He called it the collective unconscious. Beyond your personal history, beyond the specific things that happened to you in your specific childhood, in your specific family, there exists a deeper layer. A layer shared by all of humanity, across time, across geography, across language. It is populated by what Jung called archetypes, universal patterns of experience. The hero, the shadow, the wise old man, the child, the trickster. These aren't just characters in myths. They are alive inside you. They are patterns your psyche recognizes instinctively because they have been running through human experience for thousands of years. And here is why this matters for your life specifically. Some of what you carry is not yours alone. Some of the fear you feel, the shame, the guilt, the sense of never quite being enough, was passed to you. From parents who never processed their own wounds, from grandparents who survived things they never had language to describe, from generations of people who learned to survive by going numb. You may be carrying grief that isn't yours to carry. You may be living out a pattern that began long before you were born. This doesn't mean you are powerless. It means that your healing is larger than you realize. When you choose to become conscious, to stop repeating, to start integrating, You are not just healing yourself. You are interrupting a pattern that may have been running for generations. That is not small. That is extraordinary. Let me tell you about a child, a little boy who cried one afternoon, really cried for the first time in months, over something that seems minor now. A toy that broke, a plan that fell apart, a small injustice that, to a child, felt enormous. And the adult in the room, a person who loved him genuinely, said, "Stop crying. It's nothing. Be strong." The boy stopped. He learned, in that moment, something that would travel with him for the next 30 years. Feeling deeply is weakness. Tears are shameful. Emotions are a problem to be solved, not a signal to be heard. 20 years later, that boy, now a man, sits in a relationship where his partner keeps saying, "I never know what you're feeling. You're always so closed off. I feel like I'm talking to a wall." He doesn't understand what she means. He isn't aware that he built a wall. He thought he was just being strong. Jung called this a learned disconnection, and he believed that no disconnection is ever final. The path back to yourself is always available. It requires only one thing: the willingness to feel what you taught yourself not to feel. Right now, take a breath. Think of an emotion you have been pushing away recently. Not analyzing, not explaining, just pushing away. Anger, grief, longing, shame, fear of being truly seen. Ask yourself honestly, what is this emotion trying to tell me? What need is buried beneath it? What wound is still asking to be acknowledged? You don't have to solve it right now. You only have to be willing to look at it. Because Jung understood something that modern culture desperately resists. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. You cannot transform what you will not first acknowledge. The emotion you keep suppressing will not disappear. It will wait. It will find another door, a physical symptom, an inexplicable sadness, an anger that arrives from nowhere and seems disproportionate to everything. Jung said, "The symptoms are the soul's attempt to make the ego aware of what it has refused to accept." Stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Start asking, "What is this trying to show me?" Now I want to tell you something that most videos on this topic will never say. The process Jung described, the process of individuation, of becoming who you truly are, is not comfortable. It is not a self-help formula. It is not a weekend retreat. It is not 5 habits of highly conscious people. It is a genuine reckoning. It requires you to look at the parts of yourself you have spent years carefully not looking at. The places where you are selfish, where you are afraid, where you are still the child who just wanted to be loved and didn't know how to ask. It requires you to mourn the versions of yourself you abandoned in order to survive. It requires you to sit with uncertainty and resist the urge to paper over it with easy answers. But here is what is also true. On the other side of that reckoning is something most people spend their entire lives looking for and never finding. Not happiness in the shallow sense, not success, not approval. Wholeness. The sense that you are not fighting yourself anymore. That the different parts of you, the bright and the dark, the strength and the vulnerability, are finally moving in the same direction. Jung didn't promise his patients happiness. He promised them something far more valuable: the possibility of becoming real. If this video is speaking to something inside you right now, share it with one person in your life who is in the middle of a hard chapter. Tell them, "This found me at the right time. Maybe it will find you too." And subscribe to Carl Jung Philosophy, because every week we go deeper into the ideas that actually change lives. Let's talk about the concept that may be the most difficult for the rational mind to accept: synchronicity. We touched on it earlier with Jung's story, but I want to go deeper. Because synchronicity is not just a fascinating anecdote. It is a fundamental part of how Jung understood the relationship between your inner world and your outer experience. Jung defined synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence of inner and outer events that have no causal connection, yet feel undeniably related. You think of a person, and they appear. You are on the verge of giving up, and the exact right message finds you. You lose something that felt essential, only to discover that in losing it, you found something more essential still. The rational mind says these are coincidences. The Jungian mind says coincidences that repeat and carry meaning are not coincidences. They are communications. From what? From the deeper layer of yourself that is not limited to your conscious, rational, daytime mind. Your unconscious doesn't experience time the way your ego does. It doesn't separate inner and outer the way your rational mind insists on doing. It operates through symbol, through resonance, through the quiet placement of exactly the right experience at exactly the right moment. Jung believed the universe, or what he called the unus mundus, the unified world, responds to the soul's readiness. Not before, not after, when you are truly ready. Think about a time when a loss that devastated you later revealed something you could not have found any other way. A relationship that ended and left you sitting alone with yourself for the first time in years, only to discover that you had never actually met yourself before. A plan that collapsed just before completion, only to expose a direction that was so much more aligned with who you were becoming. A friendship that faded, only to create the space for something more genuine to arrive. At the time, none of it felt like a gift. It felt like failure, like loss, like proof that something was wrong with you or your life. But Jung would ask you to consider a different interpretation. What if your soul knew something your ego didn't? What if the loss was a redirection, not a punishment? What if the very thing you are grieving right now is creating a space you don't yet know how to imagine? Jung said, "What seems like tragedy to the ego often turns out to be the very thing that saves the soul." Here is something I want you to try. Think about the most difficult relationship of your life. Not to re-enter the pain, to learn from it. Ask yourself, What did this person reveal about me that I might never have seen otherwise? What part of me became activated in that relationship? What quality did I have to develop because of what happened there? Because Jung believed that relationships are not accidents. We attract people who mirror our unresolved material, not because the universe is cruel, because the unconscious is efficient. It will use whatever is available to try to move you toward wholeness, especially pain. Even the people who hurt you most were, in some sense, sent by a part of you that needed to grow. This is not an excuse for harm. It is an invitation to curiosity, to look beyond the wound and ask, what was I being called to integrate here? The individual's most sacred task, Jung believed, was this: to become who you actually are. Not who your parents needed you to be, not who your culture rewards, not who your fear allows, who you actually are. He called this the process of individuation, and he believed most people never fully undertake it. Not because they lack the capacity, because they lack the courage to face what it requires. It requires meeting your shadow. It requires grieving the paths not taken. It requires accepting that you are both more and less than what you have presented to the world. But when a person genuinely commits to this process, something shifts that cannot be undone. They stop being driven by patterns they don't understand. They start responding instead of reacting. They begin to notice the difference between what they truly need and what they have been conditioned to pursue. They become, in the truest sense of the word, themselves. And Jung believed this is what the soul came here to do: not to achieve, not to perform, not to be approved of, to become real. Right now, place your hand on your chest. Ask yourself honestly, what part of myself have I been afraid to bring into the light? What version of me exists in the quiet moments, the one I don't show in public, the one I've almost convinced myself doesn't matter, that is actually the most real part of who I am? That part isn't a problem. That part is the invitation. Because in Jungian psychology, the things we most suppress carry the greatest energy for transformation. The anger you've never let yourself feel fully might be the boundary you've never been able to set. The ambition you've never let yourself admit might be the direction your soul has been trying to move toward for years. The grief you've never let yourself complete might be the tenderness that makes you genuinely, unusually capable of connecting with others. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your unexpressed self waiting to be integrated. Drop in the comments right now, 777, I am finally ready to face the parts of myself I've been afraid to see. Say it like you mean it, because you do. Let's talk about what happens when you begin to live from a conscious place. When you start to understand why you do the things you do, when you start to recognize your patterns before they complete their cycle, when you stop blaming the world for what is actually an invitation from within, everything changes. Not suddenly, not all at once, but steadily, irreversibly. You begin to make decisions from a different place, not from fear of what you might lose, not from hunger for what you've been told you should want, from something quieter and more steady, from what Jung called the self, the deeper center of the personality that is always oriented toward wholeness. You begin to tolerate uncertainty differently, not without fear, but with a kind of faith, not blind faith, but earned faith, that even the confusion serves something. You begin to look at difficult people differently, not with anger, with curiosity. What is this person mirroring in me right now? You begin to look at your own history differently, not as a series of wounds, as a map of exactly how you arrived here, and a guide to where you are capable of going. There is a quote Jung left us that I want you to carry. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Think about that for a moment. Not to accept your strengths. Everyone is somewhat willing to do that. To accept yourself completely. The contradictions, the fears, the desires you've buried. The capacity for both love and anger that lives inside you. The ways you have failed and the ways you have quietly shown up again and again in spite of everything. Complete acceptance. Jung said this was the most terrifying thing because it requires the dissolution of the mask, the letting go of who you thought you needed to be. And yes, it is terrifying, but it is also the only genuine path to freedom, because the energy it takes to maintain a mask, to keep certain parts of you in shadow, to present only the acceptable version, is enormous. When you stop doing that, that energy comes back to you, and it becomes available for something else entirely, for your actual life. I want to leave you with something true. Nothing you have experienced was wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the failure, not the years you spent being someone you were never meant to be, not the relationships that ended before you were ready, not the grief you are still holding. None of it was random. None of it was punishment. It was all, in the language of the unconscious, preparation. Every loss was teaching you something about yourself. Every wound was revealing something that needed to be seen. Every closed door was redirecting you, sometimes roughly, sometimes painfully, toward something that required exactly who you are becoming. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not a mistake in the making. You are a person in the middle of the most important journey a human being can take, the journey back to yourself. Jung spent his entire life studying this journey, and what he discovered, what he returned to again and again across decades of work, was this: the soul does not give up on you. It does not run out of ways to try to reach you. It will use joy, it will use pain, it will use synchronicity and symbol, and the same lesson wearing 1,000 different faces, until finally, you stop long enough to hear it. And when you do, everything changes. Not because your circumstances suspended become easier, but because you do. You become the kind of person who can face hard things and not be destroyed by them. Who can lose something and eventually find the meaning in the loss. Who can stand in the uncertainty and stay present. Not because the fear is gone, but because you have learned to trust something deeper than the fear. This is the life Jung was pointing toward. Not a perfect life, an integrated one. Before you leave this video, right now, in this moment, write in the comments, 999. My story is not over. My greatest chapter is beginning. Say it for yourself. Say it because it's true. Your unconscious has been working in your favor longer than you know. Every dream that left you unsettled, every intuition you dismissed too quickly, every emotion that arrived at an inconvenient moment and refused to leave. These were not interference. They were guidance. And the fact that you are here, watching this, listening, feeling whatever it is you are feeling right now, is itself not an accident. Your soul knew you were ready, even if your mind is still catching up. The process of individuation is not fast. It is not linear. It will ask things of you that you didn't expect, but it will also give you things you did not know were possible. A relationship with yourself that is honest and quiet and real. A capacity for life that is larger than the one you were living inside. A sense, finally, genuinely, that you are not lost. You are exactly where your story required you to be. And where it is taking you next is already being prepared. Not by accident, by the deepest intelligence that exists, the one that has lived inside you from the beginning, the one that has been waiting patiently for you to come home. Subscribe to Carl Jung Philosophy. Every week we go deeper into the ideas, the stories, and the inner work that actually change lives. If this video found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. And leave a comment below. Tell us what part of this woke something up in you. Your words might be exactly what someone else needed to read today. We'll see you in the next video.